Good evening. So I'm Charles Garrett, the Society's president, and I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to the inaugural Vivian Perlis concert. Thanks to very generous support from the Virgil Thompson Foundation and the Aaron Copland Fund, our society going forward will be able to present a concert of American music just like this at each of our annual conferences. I'd like to thank Sandy Graham for making all the arrangements for tonight's concert, and also want to extend our appreciation to M. Steinert & Sons for donating use of the piano. With this concert series, we honor Vivian Perlis for her scholarship and her pioneering work with the oral history of American music at Yale University. Her significance to American music studies has been immense and long-lasting, and the impact of her work has garnered our Society's Irving Lowen's Book Award and our Lifetime Achievement Award. Vivian was unable to attend tonight's performance, and I'd like to read from a note she sent last week. Alas, I'm not able to be there for the concert on Friday evening. I know it will be a special event. I send my greetings and thanks to the board and members of the Society, to loyal friends, to donors, and to the many who have made this concert possible. With regrets, fond memories, and hopes for a bright future for Sam. Let's all thank Vivian for her contributions and for bringing us together this evening. We are very pleased to pay tribute to Vivian with the gift of musical performance through tonight's concert, which includes a number of pieces written by composers whom she knew and interviewed during her illustrious career. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome the Florestan Recital Project, featuring artistic co-founder and pianist Allison D'Amato and soprano Tony Arnold, who will explore the wealth of styles that shape American song repertoire.
And we're especially thrilled to be honoring Vivian Perlis, who is a pioneer in the documentation and elucidation of American music's evolution. The breadth of American song is amazing and impossible to categorize. But in honoring Vivian's work, Tony and I have put together a program that spans more than a century of compositional voices, with excerpts from interviews from the Oral History of American Music archives. In 2005, Vivian Perlis and her co-author Libby Van Cleve published Composers' Voices from Ives to Ellington, an oral history of American music. In her introduction, Vivian articulates the essence of her work, quote, "To preserve the intangibles of personality encapsulated in the manner of speech and expression unique to each individual. The sound of a voice holds an intensity and spontaneity that the written word cannot fully convey, just as a page of written music only hints at the emotion and profundity invoked by the sound of the music. Our aim is to bring the voices, thoughts, and ideas from OHAM to a wider audience, and in so doing, increase understanding of the art of composition and the issues affecting creative musicians in our dynamic times." So we've chosen to combine some Ives songs with two Elliott Carter songs, one early and one late example of his work. And there will also be the first of 3 audio excerpts of interviews from the Oral History of American Music Archives with Vivian Perlis at the helm. We would ask that you would hold your applause until the final Ives piece entitled Afterglow. Ives was, I can't even describe how important he was to American music, I'm sure you know. But he was also very important to Vivian. Of course, he was the first composer who inspired her to go on this oral history approach, not able to interview Ives himself as much as all the people that knew him and lived with him and worked with him. And so I thought, before we continue on with the music, I'll just share with you a little bit of her words at the beginning of her Ives book, which sort of started it all. Vivian says, "In our desire for certainty in an uncertain world, we would like to have all the answers to the perplexing questions about Ives' music. But the way a composer translates his experience into the work is elusive. I dare say, if Ives were here himself, he would not know the hows and whys of his compositions. He did not want to be categorized, dissected, or pigeonholed. When you have caught his music one way, he turns it into something else before you can finish your analytic sentence. His personality was like this too, full of paradoxes, making it almost impossible to define what he was really like. The paradoxes and questions remain, partly because of Ives' desire for privacy and his belief in a continuing, unexplained spirit. Even more, one can feel his sense of fun. One can almost hear him say, 'You can't catch me.'" So we hope you enjoy our program this evening, and we thank you, Vivian, for your dogged and elegant contributions to American music.
Now came still evening on, and twilight gray had patter of little feet, the sound of a door that is opened, and voices soft and sweet. From my study I see in the lamplight, descending the broad hall stair, grave Alice and laughing Allegra, and Edith with golden hair. Between the dark and daylight comes a pause that is known as children's awe. The evening light dies down, all the old songs begin to crowd the soft air, choiring confusedly. Then above that sea of immense complexities, the clear tenor of memory I did not know I had enters like a rod of text held out by a god of meaning. It governs the high wayward waves of what is always going on in the world. Oh, that becomes accompaniment, and it is what we start out with now. This is no time to pluck or harp on antiquities of fame. These soft hammers give gentle blows to all their strings, blows that strike with a touch of challenge and of love. Thus what we are being sung, against what we come to be a part of, rises like a kind of light.
I'm going to identify myself and the tape recording. This is Vivian Perlis, and I'm here with Elliot Carter. It is November 8th, 1999, and we are in New York City. And this is an interview for the Yale Oral History Project in American Music. How does it feel to you to be called the Dean of American Composers and the great grand old man of American music? And does that seem strange to you?
Oh, it's just because I'm old. I'm glad that people think that I've done things that are worth hearing, that some people think that. But you know, we live in a society that is so large and so confused that the kind of work that I do is something that's just a tiny drop in a small bucket. And whether it will ever be anything more or not is something I've refused to think about. Unfortunately, we are working in a profession that doesn't pay very much. It doesn't have astronomical sums like my friend Bill de Kooning could get such huge sums of money, which gives a kind of publicity to his work. I'm not so sure that his work is appreciated by a large number of people. They certainly appreciate the money that's spent for it, but they're not so sure they really like it. In fact, we're getting now a whole series of articles in the paper about what paintings Americans like, and we know, you know, Norman Rockwell is a painting that people like. Mm-hmm. Of course, in America, something has happened as a result of my generation that has changed everything, and that is we, Aaron and many of us, worked hard to get music composition taught in various places, in universities and everything. This was something that happened, and now there are 20,000 composers in the United States.
I think it's quite different than young composers today are not educated in the arts as such, and it's sometimes surprising that they don't read, and they don't have the kind of education, general education.
Yeah, well, I think that this is part of the whole decline of education, you know, mm-hmm. And not merely with composers, but with everybody, mm-hmm. So that they're appealing to a public that's also not educated.
Yeah. Do you have any young composers that you think you admire particularly?
I prefer not to say anything about that.
That's a very wise thing.
Shook down on me the dust of snow from the hemlock tree.
Thompson composed songs throughout his remarkable career which offer a unique window into his changing musical concerns and his compositional evolution. On February 26th this year, Florestan Recital Project released the complete songs of Virgil Thompson for voice and piano on the New World Records label. I don't have it with me. I wanted to bring them to show and tell, but they haven't come yet. These discs offer the most complete recorded collection of works for voice and piano of Virgil Thompson, and it also includes works that were previously unpublished and unrecorded. This next song, Vernal Equinox, is an unpublished song from Thompson's student days at Harvard, and it's followed by a stellar example of Thompson's affinity for Gertrude Stein's modernist poetry. As Thompson says, "My hope in putting Gertrude Stein to music had been to break, crack open, and solve for all time anything still waiting to be solved, which was almost everything, about English musical declamation. My theory was that if a text is set correctly for the sound of it, the meaning will take care of itself. And the Stein texts for prosodizing in this way were manna. With meanings already abstracted or absent, or so multiplied that the choice among them was impossible, there was no temptation toward tonal illustration, say of birdie babbling by the brook, or heavy, heavy hangs the heart. You could make a setting for sound and syntax only, and add, if needed, an accompaniment equally functional. I had no sooner put to music after this recipe one short Stein text that I knew I had opened a door. The two things you never asked Gertrude, ever, were about her being a lesbian and what her writing meant."
The scent of hyacinths like a pale mist lies between me and my book, and the south wind washing through the room makes the candles quiver. Cousin to Claire washing in the wind on the band beagles which have cousin line sign, and arrange a reading match to presume a certain point, to extate a certain past lint, to extate a lint some crime. Low and short is life. Bit, tore, her clothes towards it, torn a bit towards it, sit down in vacant Shirley lots, a single bit and with a single establishment that has a lily grow. Come to the pen, come in the stem, come in the grass-grown water. Lily wet, why? This is so pink and stammer. A long bean which shows bows is collected by a single curly shady get. Get set, wet bet. It is a snuff to be told, then can have wither, can is it, and sleeps not. Is it a lily scarf, the pink and blue yellow? Not blue, not odor, some nobles are bleeding, 2 seats on end. Why is grief? Grief is strange black. Sugar is melting. We will not swim. Preciosilla. Please get wet, wet, naturally in weather. Could it be fine or 5 year? Could it be so in a struck? Could it be gold up, stringing in it, while witches hanging and dingling and pinning? Not so, dots, large dress dots, big sizes, less laced, diamonds, white, diamonds bright, diamonds in the light, diamonds light, diamonds star, diamonds hanging to be far, before this been Leslie almost a best willow vest, a green guest. Go, not guest. Go. Toasted Susie is my ice cream. My silent sailing night. Isabel, wildwood's eyes and primrose hair, quietly on the wood so wild, in moves of mass and daphne dews. How also still she lay, 'neath of the white thorn, child of tree, like some lost happy leaf, like blowing flower stealed, as fain would she anon, for soon again 'twill be, win me, woo me, wed me, oh weary me deeply. Now even calm lay sleeping. Night, Isabel, sister Isabelle, Sainte Isobel, Madame Isabelle, la belle.
Alright, this is Martha O'Neckle, and I'm with Pauline Oliveros on November 10th, 1981, and we are at the Yale Music Annex.
Well, my earliest memories are sound, remembering sounds, remembering piano lessons going on in the house, remembering riding in the car and listening to the sound of the motor and listening to the sound of my parents' voices being modified by the motor. That funny sensation where the voice becomes sort of choppy and modulated from the vibration. Being scared of the toilet flushing because of the sound. Well, what drew me into composition was what I heard mentally. And I had a really sort of dramatic experience of involuntary hearing, meaning hearing that was going on in the imagination. In high school, I was about 16, 15 and 16, and I think I was reading a poem, perhaps by Tennyson. I'm not sure if it was Tennyson or not, but in any case, as I was reading the poetry, I began hearing sound. All I remember was wanting so badly to make music and not knowing how, because I had been trained as a performer, not as a composer, and not. I mean, I hadn't had any real encouragement or had any way of getting access to what was going on in my mind, you know. Although I made the decision to become a composer right then and there, when I heard those sounds, I had no way to do it, and I had to struggle very, very hard for many years to get at what it was that I was hearing. A lot of the work that I've done over the last 12 years or so has fallen under a title which is sonic meditation. I have interest in any kind of way of making sounds that will come out of all those ferments. And I think it's really exciting. I think it's one of the exciting issues of our time, is the rate at which it's possible to assimilate new instrumentation. And I mean, it's new instrumentation, you know, which makes it possible for people to change.
Oh, gorgeous black mortal, what raptures your wild struggles, tremblings of the vein, shakings of the center. Oh, gorgeous blue bottle, what raptures your wild struggles, tremblings of the vein, shakings of the center. what raptures your wild struggles, tremblings of the veil, shakings of the center. What Pauline Oliveros finally got at was deep listening, an aesthetic based upon principles of improvisation, electronic music, ritual, teaching, and meditation. Deep listening is designed to inspire us to practice the art of listening and responding to environmental conditions in solo and in ensemble situations. The sonic meditations are a tool used in deep listening. The sonic meditations embody the concept of deep listening, which include non-judgmental perception, development of empathy through listening, creation of non-hierarchical social relationships in music making, expanding internal and external awareness, and finding a new understanding of sensuality and the body. Wind horse, which is the lovely mandala that hopefully you all picked up on the way in. Wind horse is a chorus based upon listening and responding in a variety of ways and using the wind horse mandala as a kind of map for organizing and creating the performance.
From the center circle marked listen, each individual performer chooses her own optional pathways, returning to the center circle at any time. The length of time spent on any circle could be as little as a comfortable breath or many breaths. The total performance time is approximate and may be predetermined or not.
And for our purposes today, as you will join us in this performance, we'll see how long it wants to go. Looking on the map in the center, to listen means to include all that is possible to hear. Be aware of the sound sources. Decide whether to match what is heard or to differ from it.
Pitch is just to the left of listen. Listen for or create a tone, vocal or otherwise, that focuses on a regular vibration or frequency.
Sound. Listen for or create an irregular vibration or noise that is not centered on a pitch. Examples could be vocal fry, a sneeze, or a rustling.
Match. Selectively tune as exactly as possible to a pitch or sound that you hear.
Differ. Selectively differ from what is heard. Differing from a pitch could be from a tiny interval, just enough to cause beats, to a large interval, to a sound. Response to a sound might be a different sound or a pitch.
Metrical rhythm means to apply to a pitch or sound a rhythm that can be measured.
Organic rhythm means to apply to a pitch or sound a rhythm that is a process, like a breath, or clouds moving, or wind blowing.
Louder or softer means to apply to a pitch or sound dynamic shapes relative to what is heard.
Story. Tell about an experience with the wind, or a dream, or a fantasy about the wind.
Metaphor. Make sounds which stand for the wind, either solo or with others.
Inner. Listen or respond to what is perceived in imagination or memory.
And finally, outer. Listen or respond to what is perceived outside of oneself from others or the environment.
in our performance of Wind Horse, please remember that others are listening for you and responding to you. and string it. Take a banana and peel it. Buy a baby blue nash and wheel and deal it. Now he's raised a mast and tied himself to it with rats. Drunker than a robin on the wing. Count your kisses, sweet as honey. Count your bosses, dirty money. The bed's oak and clumsy, pitching with its crew. A man and a wife. Now he's dancing, moving only his feet. No way to shut him up, but roll over, scattering ruffles and silk, stiff with the dog's breath among lilies and ripening skin. Love on a raft by the light of the moon, and the bandit gaze of the old raccoon.
This is Ingram Marshall. I'm sitting here with Joseph Schwantner in his studio on the 4th floor of Stuckel Hall at Yale University in New Haven. It's August 22nd, the year 2000.
22nd.
23rd.
When I was a very young boy, my father helped me make a crystal radio set. And this was really magical because it had no batteries. It had this crystal, and it had a few little bits of wire, and it had a little earpiece. And I would listen all night long to whatever stations I could pick up. And I got my first experience of listening to music, seriously, on a crystal radio as a young boy.
In one ear and out the
In
other.
one, yeah, right.
That's not stereo.
And when you think about it, the vast array of music that was available even then was, I mean, I hadn't thought about it very much, but everything from country music to blues to jazz to what then was, you know, the popular music of the day.
You know, I find a lot of composers who grew up in the 50s and 60s talk about how important it was to them that they were exposed to a great variety of music when they were young, and mainly through radio or records.
Right. That's right. I don't think it's so unusual, but throughout my career, I've had a tendency to be preoccupied with writing music for my friends. There's just lots of examples of that in my work.
And that shows up on your webpage, too, because you have a section called Friends and Colleagues.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's a lot of nice pictures of people you've worked with.
Yeah.
I think that's a really nice touch, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It humanizes.
Well, I mean, there are people that are important in my life and that have, you know, we go through life making music. And I think the best music is made when you make it with your friends. That's how I feel about it.
Do you think there's a Schwantner sound?
Oh, I have no idea. I haven't thought about that. Yeah, I mean, you know, there are ways that I handle materials, kind of idiosyncratic ways that I handle materials that keep cropping up in my pieces, because I tend to be fairly single-minded about the materials I work with. So you hear similar sounds. There are certain fingerprints, sounds that are constantly re-emerging in the work, and so I think that's inevitable. But I don't obsess over it, or I don't concern myself with it too much. I still remains an important presence in American music. It seems to me we can't escape that. Now, whether he's in fashion today or not is beside the point. There was this very original voice there and here was a man who had an absolutely first-rate musical education, you know, and yet was certainly not part of the kind of professional musical establishment during his life, and felt that he had to go his own way. I admire that a lot.
This is Ingram Marshall.
symmetry, binding with thread of Persian silk.